All right, so Kevin Max, former singer for DC Talk, now considers himself an ex-evangelical. Well, let's get into that topic today. Of course, I'm talking about the recent article from the Christian Post, which came out recently. I'm going to read a portion of it. The article is in response to a tweet from Kevin Max in which he recently declares himself to be an ex-evangelical, or that is to say, no longer an evangelical Christian. However, that term may variously be defined. Of course, the word evangelical literally means one who is related to the gospel, the evangelium, the good news of the life, death, resurrection of Jesus Christ. As far as I understand it, the term was originally used to describe the Lutheran movement under Martin Luther. Luther himself actually preferred the term evangelical as over against the Roman Catholic medieval church. Unfortunately, the movement became known as Lutherans, but today we commonly use the word evangelical to mean virtually anything that has to do with the proclamation of the gospel. But we tend to think of political organizations, political movements, and certain types of churches. But the basic definition of the gospel is, or evangelicalism, is one who believes the gospel and therefore evangelizes. So let's get into the article. We'll read a little bit about this. This is from the Christian Post. It starts off, report. Hello, my name is Kevin Max and I'm an ex-evangelical. He tweeted Saturday, sparking a large response from many of his Christian followers. Well, that's probably exactly what he wanted. That's why you go on and tweet anything, right? You go on and you tweet so that you can get some sort of a response. So he's provoking the beast, he's poking with the stick, and he's going to get a response from that because that's exactly what he wants. Quoting the article again, some praised the musician's post, claiming they also were ex-evangelicals, a term that has been used commonly in recent years to describe individuals who no longer identify as evangelicals, or as we commonly call them, apostates, right? That's the term that means one who's left the faith, left the gospel, left the Christ of the gospel. But it gets complicated in the case of Kevin Max. Still quoting the article, others on social media stated that they had never heard the term, which has been associated with progressive Christians who've left evangelical Christianity due to theological or political reasons in recent years. Well, yeah, they leave the faith, of course, because they no longer believe it. Maybe they never believed it in the first place. Maybe they've confused the Christian faith with political ideology, and so what they think they're leaving is nothing more than a superficial version of Orthodox and historic Christianity. The article goes on to say, in response to a social media user who said Max no longer believed in Jesus, the Jesus freak singer quipped, nope, didn't say that, read text carefully. So he seems to be implying that he's leaving something of the movement or the organized or the institutional form of Christianity. We may call that the church. But he doesn't seem to be saying that he's leaving Jesus. Now that poses a pretty big question to us. Is it possible then to be a true Bible-believing, gospel-changed, transformed, sanctified Christian without participating in the church? My answer to that is pretty hard to make that claim. Pretty hard to make that claim, especially since the Bible emphasizes greatly in the New Testament participation in the life of the church. Now, maybe I'm reading into this too far. But let's go on to read just a little bit more of the article, and maybe we'll gain a little bit of clarity as to what's happening here, because I'm still confused. It says, this is a Christian Post article again, in another post, Max clarified that he still follows the, quote, universal Christ. He says, I have no idea how many people, blogs, or podcasts are using that announcement to further division, but I'm here for the grace, he assured. Well, come on, Kevin Max. The reason you tweeted that in the first place is so that people would respond to what you said, right? I mean, you were hoping for this. You're hoping that people will do blogs and YouTube videos like I'm doing right now. You're hoping to get discussion, and we're going to find out why here in just a second as we read the article a little bit further. But you're going to blame us then for furthering the division after you poke the bear with the stick to get some kind of a response from the Christian community, which is exactly what you're going to get. In fact, I'm just going to guess. I can't read your mind or know your heart. But if nobody responded to your tweet, I imagine you would have been deeply disappointed by that, and you would have done something else to try to provoke an even more an even greater response. That's what provocateurs usually do. They poke until they get the response that they're looking for. Now, here's another quote, and I think this is the key that's going to explain this for us. I think we can get to the bottom of why Kevin Max is talking like this, and this is his direct quotes here. So listen to this. Quote, "For all those people using my post as plug and play for your own hot take or personal discourse," I guess that's what I'm doing right now, because here comes a hot take rather, just had breakfast. "I offer the lyrics to an upcoming song off my new band, the Sad Astronauts Band album, Adult Fears, titled It's Okay. I'm sorry for being obtuse or difficult, but it's a process, love," he says. Okay, so there's a new album. Is that what this is all about? We've got a new album, we've got a new band. You've got a new band, the Sad Astronauts Band, and now you've got a song that you want us to check out in your new band and your new album. So you're going to declare yourself an EXvangelical to get a social media response in which you can redirect us then to your new band, new album, and new song. Well, I think we see what's happening here now, don't we, at this point? Well, what's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel. My name is Matthew Everhart. I'm the pastor of Gospel Fellowship PCA, a Reformed church just north of Pittsburgh. If you're looking for a church like that, you found one, come visit us in real life at some point. Gospel Fellowship PCA, north of Pittsburgh, south of Butler, east of Cranberry, west of historic Saxonburg. If any of those places sound familiar, come visit us in real life. Well, what should we say in response to this? You wanted a response, so let's give a response. Well, first of all, walk with me down memory lane, will you, to when DC Talk was the best contemporary Christian band on the scene. I have to tell you, I loved DC Talk. They were just the right thing that I needed in my life at just the right moments. Young Christian, high school, looking for something to listen to besides the trash music that's out there, and DC Talk filled that niche. And did they ever? The first time I saw DC Talk in real life was at a Billy Graham crusade. DC Talk was opening up for the great Reverend evangelical minister, evangelist, Billy Graham, a true evangelical by definition of the term, one who seeks to convert people to the saving grace of Jesus Christ. And DC Talk was the opening band, Cleveland Stadium. It was absolutely amazing. And DC Talk had this ability to speak at a time, at an age, in a genre, which drew people in, drew us to worship. In fact, everything worked perfectly at that Billy Graham crusade. There were some other artists as well. But DC Talk got the crowd excited and then turned the music towards worship, and then Billy Graham came up, did his thing, and it was just a marvelous experience. One thing that I noticed about DC Talk, and I think maybe this might say a little bit about where we are today with Kevin Max's new announcement, is, when you observe the trajectory of this band, they went from rap, which is where they started. By the way, check out some of their earlier videos. One called I Love Rap Music is the goofiest music video ever. But they figured it out, and they got cool. And right when the rap thing ended and the boy band thing was coming onto the scene with NSYNC and whoever else, Boys to Men, I'm trying to think here, Backstreet Boys, duh, obviously, they were able to crest that turn. They were able to negotiate that curve from rap to boy band. And then guess what? When the 90s came along, and Nirvana grunge music became popular on the scene, guess what? DC Talk made the curve as well at that point. And so they go from rap to boy band to grunge. Maybe I've got that backwards. Maybe it's boy band to rap to grunge. But you get the idea that DC Talk intentionally was the wax nose of contemporary music. They would change their shape, they would change their sound, they would change their entire ethos as the culture went. And that, maybe that's the problem right there. Maybe Kevin Max has for 20 plus years now merely been mimicking the culture, so that now when it's popular to be an EXvangelical, when it's popular and cool and hip and snazzy and whatever else, it's groovy, Kevin Max. It's groovy to say that you're leaving those evangelical Christians and their churches and their doctrines and their dogmas to follow after the universal Christ, whatever he even means by that. Maybe that's it. Maybe Kevin Max has spent his whole adult life trying to simply make those turns as the culture twists and bends before our very eyes. In fact, I challenge you to do something. Go on to the old Google machine and do an image search for one Kevin Max, and you're going to see a bevy of pictures in which a man intentionally tries to convey that he is hip and relevant and cool. Everything from the hats to the scarves to the tattoos on the forearms. Kevin Max is a person who has relentlessly pursued relevance, popularity. He's constantly tried to surf that wave of whatever the culture is doing. And so should it be a surprise to us that he's taken yet another cultural shift, following along exactly where it is popular to go? Well, I don't particularly find that surprising myself at all. So what can we say as a response to this? For those of us who are still evangelicals, I'm Reformed, I'm Presbyterian, I'm a Protestant, but you know what? I'm an evangelical because I like the word. It means of or pertaining to the gospel, and that's exactly what I believe, and it's exactly what I preach. So political ideologies aside, what am I? I am a cross-preaching, Bible-believing evangelical minister. And so what should we say about these grown-up fanboy wannabe rock stars in the EXvangelical movement? Well, first of all, we can say this: Jesus predicted it, okay? Not the rap and the tunes and the grunge music. I'm not talking about that, but Jesus predicted very clearly that there would be many who would take his name upon them, only to then turn around and leave the faith. We call these people apostates. Now, I don't know Kevin Max's heart. It seems to me, even in the article, even in the tweets, like there's a have your cake and eat it too attempt here, because he wants to say, look, I'm still a Christian. I'm just not part of that. Maybe later he'll clarify. Maybe again he'll come back whenever the culture comes back. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. But we can simply say this, that Jesus told us that these kinds of things would happen. Listen to Matthew chapter 24, verses 9 to 11. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another, and many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. So Jesus told us that there would be many who would take his name when it's culturally savvy and acceptable to do so, only to turn their backs and walk away at the end. We see this throughout Scripture. Not only did Jesus predict it, but we see it lived out in the pages of our New Testaments. Consider, for example, Demas from Colossians chapter 4, verse 14. Paul says, Luke, the beloved physician, greets you, as does Demas. He's part of the team, Demas is. Part of Paul's greater band of support, ministers, helpers, and evangelists. He's there on the scene with Luke. Luke is one of Paul's most reliable co-laborers and evangelists. Luke, of course, the author of the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts. And here's Demas faithfully alongside. But wait, the story's not over, because when we get to 2 Timothy chapter 4:10, we read this about Demas. For Demas, in love with this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. And so when it comes time that it seems best and fitting to him, Demas then departs from the evangelical world, and he becomes the biblical poster boy of the ex-evangelical movement. Can't help but wonder if that's the same thing that Kevin Max is up to these days. He wants us to talk about it, so here we are talking about it. He's getting what he wants. And this is no surprise to us, because this happens throughout history. It's happened throughout literature. I think, of course, of Pilgrim's Progress. There's the story of Pliable, who initially indicates that he's going to go along with Christian. Remember, this is in the early chapters of Pilgrim's Progress. But then what happens is he falls into the swamp of despond, and Pliable gets a little dust on his jacket, he gets a little mud on his boots, and he goes back to the city of destruction. But here's what's interesting. If you read Pilgrim's Progress, when Pliable goes back to then mock and slander Christian to those who were in the city of destruction, guess what? They don't accept him back. In fact, they mock Pliable as one who started on a journey that he cannot finish. We see this also in the great story, The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. And I don't mean to give any spoiler alerts, but hey, the series has been out for decades. If you haven't caught up to book 7, don't be surprised at the end when Susan, one of the 4 children, we actually find out that she's not a believer and hasn't been for some time. And these kinds of things happen. Now, of course, in our soteriology as Reformed, Evangelical, Calvinist, Presbyterians, we don't believe that a person actually is truly converted and saved, yea, born again, and then falls away. No, but all those who are truly born again and converted do not fall away, but they persevere unto sanctification and ultimately to glorification. But what happens is that there is a distinction between true conversion of the soul and what we call mere profession of the lips. And this is exactly what we see in these kinds of instances where a person professes to be with Christ. They take on the name of Christ. They even act as a Christian. Remember, the early disciples, when it came time to the Lord's table, they could not identify which one of them was the betrayer because they honestly could not discern. Judas, his whole ministry, had done the part. He'd said the right words. He'd acted in the right ways. He handed out the bread and the loaves and the fish when Jesus did the miracles. He was there when the demons were cast out. He saw Jesus walking on the sea. And yet, what we come to find out is that he's actually the son of perdition, and his heart has not been changed by the transformative work of the gospel. And so, of course, he's going to fall away. But true believers do not fall away. And so while we can say that Jesus predicted these things and that Scripture describes these things, yet it's also very helpful for us at some point to take a step back from the Kevin Maxes of the world and the Susan Pevensies and the Demases and the Pliables of the City of Destruction and ask ourselves, what went wrong here? What went wrong? Maybe there's something wrong with this whole contemporary music industry that chases after the Grammy Awards, of which Kevin Max is a winner. Maybe there's something wrong with an industry that exalts celebrity Christianity. I've talked about this a number of times in a number of videos. Maybe there's something deeply disturbing about this entire celebrity culture. Maybe there's something deeply disturbing about our churches. Maybe Kevin Max has a point. But maybe it's not the point that he thought he was making. Maybe he thought he was leaving the doctrines and the stodginess of confessional or Orthodox Christianity. But perhaps what he really helps us to diagnose is that some of our churches aren't doing a good enough job teaching that doctrine, preaching it with conviction and power, preaching it with the unction of the Spirit as a man who not only believes but has had his own heart set on fire by these things. Perhaps we're not doing a well enough job catechizing our children so that they understand the foundational doctrines of the Christian faith. I ask this: what church was Kevin Max in authority under? Which are his elders? What confession did his church subscribe to? Was he even a part of an evangelical church at all in any meaningful way as he traveled around doing concert after concert, performance after performance? Is there any sense in which he himself was catechized in the great doctrines of the Christian faith, submissive to a body of elders, served by a group of deacons, and likewise serving in said local church? Was that even part of his experience? What exactly is he even leaving? Do we even know? We also might ask, are we doing a good enough job with apologetics? So many of these ex-evangelicals are falling prey to the very obvious errors, logical inconsistencies, falsehoods, downright propaganda from the unbelieving world. It's astonishing that anybody would be taken up in these things. The LGBTQ movement, modern critical theory, critical race theory. If evangelicals can't see through some of these clear and obvious lies from the unbelieving world, we might have to ask ourselves whether we're doing a good enough job in our apologetics of defending the real faith from these false teachings which are so proliferous in the world. And then finally, I should simply say this, and perhaps this is a good way to conclude the video. We should all inquire very personally and seriously whether or not we too might become an ex-evangelical. Is it possible that some of us have been faking it all along? Is it possible that we are Judas with our hand in the same bowl in which the Lord dips his own bread? Whenever we come to the table, the Lord tells us that we are to, or Paul tells us, I should say, that we are to examine our hearts to see if we're truly in the faith. Because it's possible that maybe some of us are playing games with the faith as well. Well, I personally want to thank Kevin Max for his statement, because it helps us to clarify a few things about ourselves. And though we will pray for you, if we should call you a brother, I don't know what the state of your soul is today, and I'm not going to judge that. We do pray for the best, and we do pray for our churches and for the sake of our people. Thank you so much for watching. Do love you lots. Talk to you later.